Good evening to you both, and let's begin with the queue at Elections Alberta for referendum question petitions. We heard from Thomas Lukazik off the top on his Forever Canada initiative. Najib, what's to be made of the apparent race for a petition to land the question that will define a referendum?
Well, I think it's brilliant. I think it's preemptively brilliant what Thomas is doing. The formulation of a referendum question is very important, whether, you want people to say yes or no, because it can get very confusing. So I think it's just a brilliant strategy on Thomas's part. The fact of the matter is that if, 54% of UCP members are in favor of separation, then you have a separatist party. And the premier has to deal with that and deal with that fine line. But, she should also be responsible and let Albertans know that businesses don't tend to invest in markets that are unstable. And, what's more unstable than a market of 5 million people that wants to separate from a market of 40 million people? So I think that she's probably underplaying that, and especially during a trade battle with your biggest customer.
Duane, should it be the Thomas Lukazik's pro-Canada approach is the one that's successful? How do you see the Smith government engaging in the campaign leading up to a referendum? What kind of position would that put Premier Smith in?
Well, regardless of the question that you're asking, right, whether the question is, do you want to stay in Canada or do you want to leave Canada, it's still going to have a result, right? It's still going to have a yes or no. And the problem with Danielle Smith is by allowing outside groups to do this, she has not put out a firm statement about where she stands. Now, compare that to other referendums. We knew where René Lévesque stood. We know where Jacques Parizeau stood. Even in the Brexit referendum, David Cameron put it on the ballot, but then campaigned actively with the Stay campaign. In this case, it's not being government-driven. It's being outside group-driven. And that's why I think Elections Alberta is waiting to see if they have multiple questions. But I do wonder what Danielle Smith is saying. So right now, she is saying she supports United Canada, but has also made it easier to have a referendum. That's unfeasible. At a certain point, you have to be a leader and state what side of it you're on, as opposed to, well, I support both sides.
Najib, what do you envision a referendum showdown looking like? A low-key affair, big dollar campaigns, a national debate?
Well, I think it's like what Thomas said. It depends where this separatist group, is getting their funding from and how much money they have to push people to, vote yes or no, depending on how this turns out. But again, this is just, again, a massive distraction, distracting from their sourcing scandal that's going on with this government. It's, again, like a massive distraction. It's so much unlike anything that Quebec has put forth in terms of separation. I mean, they have a cultural reason for those conversations, and Alberta just doesn't have it. And again, it's just a distraction from all the failures that this government is constantly producing: unemployment, cost of living. They haven't addressed any of these real issues that are going on, and they're just trying to distract Albertans.
Duane, how dominant?
We don't even have a question yet, Michael, and already this is a national story and an international story. I can only speak for myself, but I've been given interviews all across Canada and in Italy and in Britain and in Japan. We've seen op-eds written in The Guardian and the New York Times. So it is an international story because it is so unique. It is so interesting. You can imagine people maybe understanding Quebec secession, but Alberta secession, this is emerging new to them, and that's why they're following that. But I think it will be a very divisive debate. We're already seeing some of that, and I fear it could have economic consequences as well.
Well, and Najib, how dominant a theme do you now anticipate the debate over separation, the wait for a petition, a referendum question to be in the trio of by-elections June 23rd?
Well, I think it's going to be significant, right, during those by-elections, and depending on where this nets out with Thomas's petition, and again, it's also going to distract from the real conversations that need to be had during those by-elections as well.
All right, from the race for a referendum question to a legal challenge of contentious Alberta legislation. Bill 26 bans certain gender-affirming treatments for children under the age of 16, and the Canadian Medical Association says it's challenging the constitutionality of the legislation, arguing it the charter right to freedom of conscience. The CMA filed the challenge Wednesday in Alberta Court of King's Bench. The complainants say the Smith government is interfering in decisions that should be up to patients, families, and their doctors. Duane, three Alberta-based doctors are also involved, but surprised to see a national organization driving this, and that it would be the medical community behind a constitutional challenge.
Well, there's so many elements here, and so we have seen court challenges in other country or in other provinces over school pronouns. But Danielle Smith went much further by preventing medical intervention. And so she knew at the time that that was likely to lead to legal challenges. And sure enough, it is. And that's why maybe not her, but other parts of the UCP government and supporters have already started talking about the notwithstanding clause and basically saying that they're willing to violate charter rights to punch down on LGBTQ communities.
Najib, this isn't the only constitutional challenge. At least one advocacy group, 5 Alberta families before the courts, and the government has indicated it will vigorously defend its position. What kind of political battle do you now see ensuing here?
This is just, more identity politics, and Duane hit it on the head, right? This is like trampling on the rights of vulnerable and marginalized people, and we should refuse to participate in this kind of, political wedges and distractions that governments continue to produce. That the fact of the matter is that transgender people also have the same right to privacy and safety that the rest of us have, and we should leave this as a conversation between physicians, the patients, and the families, and stop interfering in that, and actually, putting a target and putting these folks at risk. And I, for one, am very, very tired of these identity sort of issues and the causing that the governments keep trying to distract us from the fact that they're dismantling healthcare, they're underfunding education, they're banning books. These are the things that affect all of us. And instead we're focusing on things that affect a small population, a small vulnerable population.
The Prime Minister faced his first question period this week, pressed by opposition House Leader Andrew Scheer on tariffs and defending Canadian interests.
He told Canadians that the government would collect $20 billion in revenue from those tariffs and use it to cost his platform. Now that those tariffs are going to bring in $0, 2 quick questions. Why wasn't he honest with Canadians during the election? And how is he going to make up the shortfall? Is he going to borrow it, print it, or tax it?
Mr. Speaker, our tariffs have maximum impact on the United States, minimum impact on Canada, and we are dedicating all the revenues from those tariffs to supporting the workers and businesses affected by the unjustified American actions.
Hear, hear.
It was Mark Carney's first appearance on the floor of the House of Commons, not only as a newly elected member of Parliament, but of course as the Prime Minister. Najib, what do you make of how Mark Carney handled his first question period as a rookie, and how might it define the road forward for his minority government?
I think he handled it perfectly. I love this idea of just taking questions at the beginning from leaders and then passing it on to your ministers. I think that forces the leaders to ask relevant and important questions and not waste time on things like, why haven't you tabled the budget yet, when neither Poilievre had any intention of tabling a budget in the first 100 days, and Harper never tabled a budget for months as well. So these kinds of things, if he keeps up this custom of only taking questions at the beginning, it'll force them to ask serious questions. It'll bring some decorum back that we sorely need in the House as well, and I think he handled it well. I mean, he brings a calm and a confidence that I think that it has been missing in government for a long time.
Duane, no Pierre Poilievre, no Jagmeet Singh, no Justin Trudeau. How different a session of Parliament is this destined to be?
We really don't know, but given the collapse of the minor parties, and given that it's going to be a while before Pierre Poilievre ends up in the House, it's going to have a very different look. I do wish in the clip that you had played that Prime Minister Carney actually answer the question, because this is something the Conservative have been pounding on since the election, that somehow in the middle of the campaign, the Carney government secretly cut all retaliatory tariffs against the United States, and that's patently ridiculous. On the one hand, it was well publicized at the time, including in the leaders' debate. It's not all tariffs. They specifically identified certain tariffs that would hurt Canadian businesses even more, but there are tariffs being paid. So this idea that it's zero, I wish Carney had given that answer instead of just deflecting from it. But we're going to see some of that stuff. It was a very different look in having Mark Carney. He's never been in the House before, and now he's Prime Minister. And he's dealing with a former leader who's now sort of the interim acting leader until Poilievre gets back in. So very different dynamic.
Okay, so on that point, Najib, what are you expecting of the Conservatives with Andrew Scheer at the helm in the House of Commons, at least until Pierre Poilievre returns by way of the Battle River Crowfoot by-election?
I don't think it changes anything. You've got an interim leader who failed as leader, and then you're going to get another leader coming back who's also failed as leader. So I don't think that it threatens Prime Minister Carney's government at all. I think the Conservatives have a lot of work to do before they have any kind of credibility, any hope of upsetting the Liberal government. Duane's points, I think, stand, and not just that, but the fact that you can't just turn off tap to your biggest customer and until you have other trade deals going on. So you're not in a position when you've allowed yourself to depend on one large customer across the border from you to just turn off and start dealing with other nations. So, I mean, it has to be smart, it has to be calculated, and that's exactly what the Prime Minister is doing.
Duane, the PM is set to meet with the premiers in Saskatoon on Monday. What do you see hinging on those discussions now that Parliament is sitting?
Well, there were a lot of signs in the throne speech about what he wants to talk about. So the fast tracking of major projects, the creation of a new office on that, this idea of one project, one review. The question is that a provincial review or is that a federal review or some sort of combination of the two? He's going to look for projects that are on the table. He's asked premiers to bring them. We do know from a lot of media interviews that Danielle Smith wants to revisit the Northern Gateway pipeline, but there's no proponent of that right now. And what makes it even more challenging on the Northern Gateway side is she is confusing Prince Rupert, which she talks about where it should go, versus Kitimat, which is where the previous proponents had it going. Well, there's a 250-kilometer difference between the two. And so I hope that she's got better facts at her disposal when she walks into Saskatoon.
Najib, what kind of reception should Mark Carney expect from two Western premiers in particular, namely Danielle Smith and host Scott Moe? Handshakes, smiles all around?
Well, I mean, I think from one, I think Premier Moe will be a lot more approachable and open to those discussions, and Premier Smith will continue her sort of combative attitude that she's playing for her base, and it doesn't neither. Especially for Premier Smith, it's not something that's going to do any favors for Alberta and our relationships. None of this combative attitude that she's had to date with the federal government, even the previous federal government, has resulted in any type of gain for Alberta, and I can't see it continuing that way when we're all united against this tariff battle and the other unemployment and cost of living and other things that are going on. It's just not a way or an attitude or a method of that anyone would think is smart during all of these bigger issues at hand.
Duane, do you see the secession talk factoring in some form or fashion into any of the discussions between the premiers and the Prime Minister? Does that play a role, knowing that it's lingering in the background?
Absolutely. And we saw that with the Western Premiers meeting in Yellowknife, especially with David Eby, the BC Premier. This is going to bind Smith's hands because there is an appetite to negotiate some of these deals. We're seeing public opinion switch. We're seeing the premier's attitude switch. Clearly, Mark Carney is different from Justin Trudeau on this issue. But if Smith walks in and says, I have my demands, and if I don't get all of my demands met, I'm walking out and we're going to have Alberta leave. Even if she doesn't say that explicitly, does a Legault or does a Ford go, well, if you don't get what you want, Danielle, what do you do next? So I think she has hurt the process of negotiation by setting up this separatist referendum process.
It'll be interesting to see how the June 2nd meeting turns out. Gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Good to see you both. Thank you kindly.
Okay.
Thanks,
Welcome,
Michael.
Michael. Yeah.